Baden, a member of the Ellect's Continuing Education Committee. We are pleased to present the first in a series of webinars on RDA, Resource Description and Access. Our presenter today is Robert Ellett, Catalog Librarian at the Joint Forces Staff College, Norfolk, Virginia. He is also an instructor for the online LIS program at San Jose State University's School of Library and Information Science, and a trainer for the Program for Cooperative Cataloging. Robert serves on the Elect's Cataloging and Classification Section Executive Committee and is a member of the CCS RDA Planning and Training Task Force. During the webinar, as questions occur to you, please type them into the question box. Robert will leave time at the end to respond to as many as possible. We are also recording the webinar, and you will receive a message with the slides and a link to download the recording. And now I will turn the program over to Robert.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this first in the series of webinars on RDA. For those that are new to RDA, this is the perfect time to begin learning, and I plan to basically go through a transition to Resource Description and Access, or RDA, the first steps. What I plan to do today is to walk you through some of the major changes between the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules and RDA. And I like to liken it to a transition because really it is not necessarily going in a totally different place or a totally different direction, but it is basically taking some of the best elements from AACR2 and transitioning them to a more digital environment. So what are the objectives that are going to be covered today? Some of the objectives are to understand the basic organization of RDA, to understand the difference in RDA and the RDA Toolkit, because they are different, to understand the requirements of an RDA record, because there are certain requirements called the core requirements of an RDA record, and to understand basic differences between the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules 2nd edition revised and the RDA record. What has changed? And I thought I would start out with, oftentimes presenters are asked, where did they get their information? Well, of course, I looked to Amazon, and I tried to find a book about RDA. And of course, I will make a plug for Chris Oliver's book. It's very good. But you can see that these books that I'm showing aren't yet published. So of course, I couldn't use them. And then I happened to remember that, okay, this is a published book. So of course, the presentation is based on this book. No, not quite. But, and then of course, you probably heard that RDA will initially only be an online product because it was released on June the 23rd. So I looked at a non-print resource, and of course this is a non-print resource, but this is not the RDA we should consider. RDA is really the powder for champions, really. No, I'm kidding. Let's look at some of the differences between RDA and the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, the structure of the rules. If you look at the right side of your screen, you will see the basic organization of the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules. In Part 1, you have description, the first 13 chapters, and in Part 2, you have chapters 20 through 26, which deal with headings, uniform titles, and references. So the main focus of the Anglo-American cataloging rules is basically the format of the particular work that you are cataloging. Now, I will be using some of the terms from the Functional Requirements for Bibliographic Records, or FRBR, but I won't be going into a review of those principles and entities. You'll notice on the left side of the screen you have the two main sections of RDA are recording attributes and recording relationships. The first four sections deal with recording attributes, and they deal with recording attributes of manifestation and item, of work and expression, of person, family, corporate body, of concepts, objects, events, and places. The remaining sections, sections 5 through 10, deal with recording relationships, primary relationships between work, expression, manifestation, and item, and also the Group 2 entities of FRBR, persons, families, and corporate bodies, as well as some of the subject entities, the relationships to the concepts, objects, events, places associated with the work. And of course, there are still very similar appendices, and of course, there's a glossary as well with RDA. So what is the difference between RDA and RDA Toolkit? I know many of you have heard the word RDA versus the toolkit. RDA is basically the content of the new cataloging guidelines. Okay? And RDA Toolkit is the current electronic product available from ALA Publishing. And so if you're interested in learning more about the availability of the toolkit, you can click on this link. So what is one of the first decisions you must make when using RDA? Well, instead of analyzing what format you have, you really must determine what type of description that you are going to create for the resource. Are you going to create a comprehensive, analytical, or hierarchical description? And basically, the difference is if you're going to catalog the entire resource, you're going to create a comprehensive description. An analytical description would be if you're going to catalog perhaps just a part or a chapter of a particular resource. And then the final type of description is the hierarchical description, where you're going to catalog the resource as a whole and the parts together. Okay? So that's a much more detailed type of description. So that is the first decision you need to make. What type of description is needed? And with RDA, there is basically a core element set. The core element set is a subset of the RDA element set. The RDA core element set specifies the minimum set of data consistent with RDA compliance. The core element set reflects those attributes and relationships which attained a high rating for the user task defined by FRBR. And if you want information, you can look at RDA section 2.1. This core element set is just a floor and not a ceiling. That means that you can add additional elements as needed. Agencies are encouraged to enhance the core element set to specify national requirements, reflect local needs, and to enable access to a specific resource. Additional elements may also be needed to differentiate one resource from other resources. bearing similar information. So why is a core element set necessary? It provides guidance for implementers as to the relative significance and applicability of various elements. So here is a list of the core elements for RDA. The title proper, and what I've done for you in parentheses is include the mark tag and the RDA guideline area that discusses that particular core element. The statement of responsibility relating to title proper, the addition statement, serial numbering if you have a serial, publication data, the extent of the item, the carrier type. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about carrier type in a bit. I'm not going to go over the RDA Toolkit, but I will be showing some screenshots. This is a screenshot from the RDA Toolkit, and you'll notice this is from section 2.3, where it deals with the title, and you'll see in a light blue color under title that it's identified as a core element. Other titles are optional, but the title proper is a core element. Okay. I mentioned earlier one of the fields, the carrier type. The carrier type is a core element, and it represents the container, so to speak, of the particular resource that you are cataloging. Okay. And this is the way that it looks in RDA, the RDA Toolkit. So you can see, to go back up, for example, if you were cataloging a book, the carrier type that you would use would be volume. To continue with the, and also to mention a little bit more about the carrier type, it's the categorization reflecting the format of the storage medium or housing of a carrier in combination with the type of intermediation device required to view, play, or run the content of the resource. Each value has a mark code established for it that you can use in the 338 subfield B, for example. So series is also a core element. And then you have a number of identifiers for the manifestation, and that is coming from RDA 2.15. Some of the required identifiers for the core element standard is ISBN, ISSN, other standard numbers that are internationally recognized from internationally recognized schemes, numbers assigned by publishers, and this would probably be most applicable with some of your non-print items, distributors, government agencies. And then also for rare book catalogers, fingerprints, which are identifiers used in antiquarian books, are core elements. But an identifier that's not a core element would be a URL. And then within RDA, there are core if elements. For example, the date of publication is core, but if the date of publication cannot be supplied, if there is no date of publication, then you would give in square brackets date of publication not identified. Okay. And then you would give the date of distribution if available. And so that would become a core element. In the example on the screen, the date of publication was not available or not identified, and so the date of distribution was given. Because you can see in red here on the screen, the date on the title page was the distribution date, distributed in 2010. One of the general principles of the International Cataloging Principle is about data transcription, and it's basically to transcribe elements as they appear on the source. This will be a big transition for many of you used to the Anglo-American cataloging rules, because the principle is to take what you see. There are some alternatives that are allowed, just like AACR2 has optional omissions and optional deletions. There are alternatives in RDA, and some of the alternatives dealing with data transcription are to use agency in-house guidelines or a style manual, such as the Chicago Manual of Style, which is currently in its 16th edition, or to accept data from scanned or downloaded sources on the resource. Okay, so you might be wondering, so what is missing from this core element set in RDA? Well, there are certain elements that are not necessarily required, such as other title information, the 245 subfield B, dimensions, and bibliographic notes. But I'm going to show you an example where other title information would definitely be required, because one of the major principles of RDA, one of the international cataloging principles, is the convenience of the user. So I'm showing you an example now of a resource. Victory has 1,000 fathers. Sources of success in counterinsurgency. Okay, that's one title. So let me now, whoops. There's another title that's not, where the subtitle is different, but the title proper is the same. So in this case, such as Detailed Counterinsurgency Case Studies, this is a different volume from the previous one. You would need to have to include the other title information in this case. Okay. There are other changes with RDA, and one of them is technology changes, or sorry, terminology changes that you will have to learn, basically. In AACR2, area is used, such as the 8 areas of bibliographic description. In RDA, the term is element. The term for heading in AACR2 is authorized access point. The term for main entry in AACR2 is going away in preference to the terminology preferred title and authorized access point for creator if appropriate. And instead of referring to the author, composer, director, etc., we're going to use a more generic term, creator, in RDA. The physical description will now be referred to as the carrier description. Okay, and of course, as I was practicing for a presentation in Palm Springs, I was looking out my window and I see a bunch of ducks, and they love hearing about RDA. So you're not the only ones that love to hear about RDA. They were right at the edge of my window, but it was probably the rice cakes that I was feeding them that attracted them the the most, not words about RDA that they liked. So let's look at some of the areas that are most changed with RDA. One of the areas is the recording of statements of responsibility. In RDA, the statement of responsibility is a statement relating to the identification and/or function of persons, families, or corporate bodies responsible for the creation of and contributing to the realization of the intellectual or artistic content of a resource. A statement of responsibility may include words or phrases that are neither names nor linking words, such as by. So you can have words that are other than by and the actual person's name. So the instruction in RDA Guideline 2.4.1.4 indicates to transcribe a statement of responsibility in the form in which it appears on the source of information. Apply the general guidelines on transcription given under 1.7. 1.7 is what I just talked about, where it take what you see is the basic gist of that. So let's look at what the core statement of responsibility in RDA would be for this. Now, I couldn't get a copy of the actual title page, so let's assume, for argument's sake, that there is no title page and the cover is what we are using to base our description on. Okay? So you can see that the title is clearly For the Love of Golf. Okay? And you can see under the other title information statement of responsibility. And what I've done here for you is to kind of zoom in. So you see, for example, foreword by R. Palmer, written by Frederick C. Klein, and illustrated by Mark Anderson. So what is the RDA core statement of responsibility? The RDA core statement of responsibility indicates that you only have to record the entity that has primary responsibility for the work. So in this case, it was written by Frederick C. Klein. So written by Frederick C. Klein is the only required for the core element set of RDA. Now, of course, libraries may well want to go beyond core, and I believe that the Library of Congress for their RDA test will use something that they are calling LC Core Plus, and you can see that they will include all of the elements that are in the statement of responsibility. So the author of the foreword, the author itself, and the illustrator. And the very interesting thing here is, what does this Beyond Core or LC Core Plus look like? It actually looks like what we use now for ACR2. So if you go beyond the core in RDA for the statement of responsibility, in this case, it will match what you are currently using for ACR2. ACR2 is the current cataloging rules, and I should have brought this out earlier. As I am teaching advanced cataloging this semester for San Jose, one of the supervisors of one of my students emailed me right off and said, "Why are you still teaching AACR2?" Well, for several reasons. And the main reason is that, of course, AACR2 is still the primary cataloging rules for descriptive cataloging. RDA has not been implemented by the Library of Congress, and after the test they will decide whether to do so or not. So that is one of the primary reasons that I think a knowledge of AACR2 will be helpful to those transitioning to RDA. So I have the slide here. We are not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're still taking many of the good things that we received from AACR2 with us in the description. So AACR2 rules, AACR2 records will be compatible in catalogs. If you're interested in seeing more examples of RDA records, the Library of Congress has a good number of them, and this link deals with the book records that they currently have, examples that show differences between AACR2 and RDA. And I'll just show you a few other examples that I have. This is an AACR2 record. And this is an RDA record with LC core elements only, plus an alternative to use when you are, for example, downloading a record. And so it's not necessary to follow the ISBD, or the International Standard Bibliographic Description, with RDA. RDA is not divorced from it, but you have the option to follow it or not. So you can see this particular record has a number of fields totally in capital letters. A cataloger could decide to omit some of the information in the 245 subfield C, for example, because according to guideline RDA 2.4.1.4, there's an optional omission allowing a cataloger to omit information in the statement of responsibility or to include it if it doesn't reduce access to the resource. Okay, so I have another example dealing with the statement of responsibility actually coming up now. So we have another, for the argument's sake, let's say that we are using the cover, because I didn't get a copy of the title page. Actually, this is the title page here. And so we have, and I was there. So let's look at a difference between the titles and abbreviations in statements of responsibility with AACR2 and RDA. According to AACR2 1.1F7, the rule indicates to include only titles and abbreviations of nobility, address, and honor, and distinction. Otherwise, omit them. So we would omit terms like captain or PhD or doctor with AACR2. With RDA, basically the rule is to transcribe the statement of responsibility in the form in which it appears. So there's no guesswork as to what to record. And then again, you can use the optional omission to abridge a statement of responsibility only if it can be abridged without loss of essential information. Do not use the mark of omission, the ellipses, to indicate such an omission. Always record the first name appearing in the statement. When omitting names from the statement of responsibility, naming more than one person, apply the instructions given in RDA 2.4.1.5. And the Library of Congress proposed practice for the RDA test is generally not to omit information or names. They would provide the full statement as it appears here. Here's another example where statements of responsibility are taken outside of the chief source of information. With AACR2, they must be bracketed. You can see here that the statement of responsibility was taken from the title page verso, so the statement is bracketed. With RDA, only statements taken from outside the resource itself are enclosed in brackets. And so the information can be obtained from any place within the resource itself and not be bracketed. Okay. And then another example of access points. Of course, you probably heard that the rule of 3 is gone with RDA. And in this case, we have 4 authors. With more than 3 entities performing the same function, such as in this case, with AACR2, according to Rule 1.1 F5, you would use the convention of the first named author using the mark of omission, the ... and then the et al. For et alium. With RDA, you have several choices. You can follow RDA guideline 2.4.1.5, which basically indicates to record the statement of responsibility as it appears on the resource, or you can use the optional omission. When you use the optional omission, we're not going to be using Latin phrasing anymore, so the et alium goes away, and instead we're going to be using the English phrase and 3 others, or how many others that you might have. Okay. In RDA, there is no limitation as there is in AACR2. But I did want to bring up one point about AACR2 that I always tell my students. If you find that you have a group of authors, and let's say that author number 5 or author number 6 is well known in the field, I think you'd be doing your patron a disservice, and according to rules in AACR2 Chapter 21, catalogers can use judgment and record those names in a note and then provide an added entry for them. Now, as for the preferred access point for RDA, the preferred access point for RDA is the first named author. In this case, of course, the main entry in AACR2 would be the title. Okay. Now here's another example, and this example came from Amazon, The Girl Who Fell from the Sky. And you'll see the phrase, a novel by. Now, noun phrases in the statement of responsibility. With AACR2, according to Rule 1.1 F12, you would record the noun phrase as other title information. With RDA, the noun phrase, because it's connected by the word by, would become part of this statement of responsibility. Okay. And again, this is basically talking about main entry versus preferred access point. Okay. You'll notice in AACR2, for more than 3 authors, you have your title main entry, and you have your preferred access point is your first name author. Now you'll notice also in RDA the relationship designators in subfield E. Okay. And basically in RDA Guideline 18.5.1.3, it indicates to record one or more appropriate terms from the list in Appendix I with an identifier or authorized access point representing the person, family, or corporate body to indicate the nature of the relationship, more specifically than is indicated by the defined scope of the relationship in the element itself. So you really don't know what relationship Murdoch has played in ACR2, but with RDA and the relationship designator, it's clear that he is the author. Do note that the across-the-board use of relationship designators is a change from ACR2. So, and then we have creator. Creator is a core element, and it's in Chapter 19.2. If there's more than one creator responsible for the work, only the creator having principal responsibility named first in the resources embodying the work or in the reference sources is required. If principal responsibility is not indicated, only the first named creator is required. So, for example, suppose you were cataloging this report and it indicated that the report was authored by the commission members, and this happens to be a list of the commission members. You can see that the principal investigator, Klein, is listed. So if you were only following the core level requirements, Klein would be the only name in the statement of responsibility. But if you were going beyond core, you could certainly include the other names. Here's another example where you have a number of authors indicated, and in this case you really don't have a principal author indicated. So in this case, Brazelton would be meeting the core level standard. Okay. Now I have included the definition of creator for you: a person, family, or corporate body responsible for the creation of the work. And basically it includes persons, families, corporate bodies responsible for the work, and it talks about the definition of a person or family, corporate body. The interesting example I want to show you here is, of course, we have the title Before You Leap by Kermit the Frog. Well, under AACR2, poor Kermit doesn't get the respect that he so deserves. He is not the main entry, okay? But under RDA, he is an authorized access point representing the creator, because in RDA, persons include fictitious entities, and that's RDA Guideline 9.0. So Muppets are creators too. This will make Kermit very happy. Maybe he can impress Miss Piggy. And then we have another example, and this is where it's important to review FRBR principles, because we have an audio file of Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, retold by Florence Bell. So who do you think the creator of this work is? Actually, it's Belle Florence. Now, I quickly want to show you the comparison between the rules of corporate body under ACR2. They are in 21.1b2. Okay. And I've included them here. And then I include the rules for RDA. And the basic difference because the wording is basically the same, is that the rules are now in Chapter 19 for RDA. So again, the caveat to not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You will still be using your knowledge of ACR2 to help you with RDA. Okay? And this is another example. Suppose that you have a compilation of works without a collective title. Let's look at the difference. And this is your title page and your title page verso. Let's look at the difference very quickly between ACR2 and RDA. In ACR2, if a work falls into one of the categories given that lacks a collective title, enter it under the heading appropriate for the first named work in the chief source of information. So we're going to enter it under the author's name for the first name title and give added entries, added name title entries for the other works, of course. And here is the rule in ACR2. So in RDA, if the compilation lacks the collective title, construct separate access points for each of the works in the compilation. So very different from ACR2. So this is the way the RDA record will look. Basically, you will have the title proper and the statements of responsibility in the order in which they appear in the 245 field, and then you will have added name title entries for the all of the works. There's an alternative to this, and the alternative is to, instead of or in addition to constructing access points for each of the works in the compilation, construct an authorized access point representing the compilation using a devised title formulated according to the instructions in RDA 2.3.2.11. Okay. And the alternative is for the cataloger to construct or devise a title, and of course you would have the note indicating that it was devised by the cataloger, and then you would have the contents note, and you would have the name title entries for this record. Okay. And then basically with variant titles, you have if it's considered necessary for access. So again, very similar in RDA, because RDA says record variant titles if they're considered to be important for identification or access. So very comparable language. Okay, and you all know that this is Robert Downey Jr., and his name would change slightly as an authorized form, because in RDA they would include the junior in the term junior, because he's well known and he uses that as part of his name. And you can see that this is the rule in ACR2, that basically to record similar terms such as junior, senior, etc. in various languages as well. Okay. And here are a few other types of changes. For example, the abbreviation circa is going away in favor of approximately. You're going to spell out months, for example, like January, instead of B period for born or D period for died. RDA uses dashes to indicate the birth and the death. Okay. And also within personal name headings, you will see some changes, and I'm going over this very quickly. Basically, certain words such as captain, reverend, PhD will not be used in the authorized forms, but instead words like naval officer, clergyman, profession or occupation of the particular entity, field of activity of the entity will be used. If you deal with parts of the Bible, basically the abbreviations are going away, such as if you are using the heading Bible OT, you will spell it out now for Bible New Testament, and the same with Old Testament. The intervening OT and New T dealing with either books of the Bible or areas within the Bible, such as the Gospels, is going away. So you'll notice in AACR2 they have the last entity on the screen, a Bible NT Gospels, now becomes Bible Gospels. So that intermediate step is now going away. And some of the other abbreviations are also going away, such as department, which is actually should have been implemented in AACR2 if it was implemented, but that particular rule was never implemented in it, and so they adopted the practice of abbreviating it because we still dealt with the card catalog environment. So you can see some of the changes in the headings. And this is, as I said, a change that was never implemented in AACR2 that RDA will implement. And then one last PowerPoint slide. If you're interested in what the new LCRIs, which are the LC policy statements or the LCPSs, look like, you can look at this website, because this basically is Library of Congress's commentary on the use of RDA. RDA stresses cataloger judgment in deciding what information should be supplied for the user, and because the content of some of the existing LCRIs were incorporated into RDA, only about a fourth of the LCRIs for policy decisions, other than those categories listed above for like core elements, were retained and revised. Okay? So, I'm going to now turn over the mic.
Thank you, Robert. I hope we'll have a little time for you to take a look at the questions while I'm talking and perhaps be able to answer a few of them when I'm done wrapping up. This is Diane Baden again. I want to point out that this is just the first in a series of RDA webinars, and the list on your screen are the ones that are currently scheduled. But we plan for there to be additional webinars in the spring, so keep watching for announcements. The ones that are posted here, you will be seeing publicity and announcements for shortly. Also, please remember that there is some special pricing from Ellett if you register for more than one webinar at the same time. There are discounts available. So please check out the Ellect's website for upcoming webinars, e-forums. We just had a very successful e-forum on RDA, and any other events, and you'll also see announcements. I'll just wrap up my piece a bit more and tell you that you will receive an online evaluation form from ALCTS, and please do respond. We value your input and your suggestions. So thank you from me for attending, and now I'm hoping I can turn this back to Robert to see if he can answer some of your questions. Kerry, can you turn me over?
Hello, everyone. I wanted to answer a few of the questions. Is the RDA Toolkit the only way to gain access to the RDA content at this point? And the answer is yes. The RDA Toolkit currently is only available in electronic form. Now, it is planned for later this fall to be available in a limited print edition. So there will be a print edition at some point, and that is dependent on RDA. I mean, ALA Publishing, rather. Another question. Other title information is not core information. Now, as I said, it is not necessarily required, but in the example that I gave about Victory Has 1,000 Fathers, that would really be essential for access. Remember, one of the core principles that we are operating under in cataloging is convenience of the user. And if we did not record, in this case, the other title information, you would really be doing a disservice to the patron, to the user. Does RDA call for more cataloger judgment? That is a question that I could probably spend a whole period talking about, and it depends on what area you're talking about, but there is more leeway with RDA for various judgment calls based on your user group. Will LC provide guidelines such as it did with the LCRIs with AACR2? And actually they are providing, and that last screen talks about the LCPSs or policy statements. They are akin to the LCRIs for AACR2. So the LCPSs deal with the LC statements for RDA. Will LC update name headings per RDA changes? And I believe LC will do that at some point after the testing if RDA is implemented and adopted. Going back to the first decision that a cataloger must make. What type of description are you going to provide? Basically, there will be descriptions based on whether you are cataloging a work, an expression, a manifestation, for example. So at this point in AACR2, we catalog mainly for either the work or the manifestation level. So there will be certain elements that we will provide for the various different entities. I see two questions. Can the slides be made available after the presentation? Absolutely. ALCTS plans to mail out, and let me actually show two things very quickly, and I'm hoping that you will be able to see my screen. What I've given you here is also a list of the core elements, and I copied them from RDA 0.6.2, recording attributes of manifestation and item. And these are the core elements that I talked about. That is one handout that you will also get for attending this webinar. Another handout that you'll get is a really nice bibliography that my summer transition to RDA class actually began, and I finished and updated it. And what it gives you is an annotated bibliography of articles and books and presentations dealing with RDA. I tended to leave out just the ones that deal just with FRBR, for example. So it's a nice annotated bibliography, so you can look through some of the current resources. It even deals with blogs that deal with RDA and electronic lists, for example, and even some nice presentations that deal with RDA. So you have those two handouts to look at as well. Okay. So let me go back up to questions. Oh, what is the current, very good question, excellent question. So what is the current recommendation? Should we use RDA or should we use AACR2? Well, prior to October 1st, OCLC has asked its member libraries not to begin using RDA, and so you would not. Now, if you want to follow the current standard is still the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules 2nd edition.
Robert, if I can just insert myself here for a moment. This is Diane again. There have been a bunch of questions about the PowerPoint and the recording, and so I'd like to repeat what I said during my introduction. All the attendees will receive an email from ALCTS with the PowerPoint, with Robert's handouts that he just mentioned, with a link to download the recording itself, and also possibly the answers to the questions that Robert has not had time to address right now. So I hope that will alleviate your concerns about having access to this material, and you will receive all of that within a day or two. Robert, it's 6 o'clock. Do you want to keep going for those who are still online, or is it time to say goodbye?
Well, can you hear me?
Yep.
I wanted to answer one question. When will AACR2 disappear? And actually, I'm hoping by my presentation you will see that certain elements of AACR2 are being carried over into RDA, and they won't disappear. And again, I want to emphasize that my presentation dealt with transition from AACR2 to RDA. Very quickly to tell you that RDA takes many elements, probably 85 or almost 90% of the elements, and puts it and takes it from RDA from AACR2. So I want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for, especially for the East Coast people staying late at work. I appreciate your diligence and your attendance. I want to thank the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee. They were wonderful in setting up logistics. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Goodbye, everyone.